As entrepreneurs, we all have a reason why we chose to leave our 9 to 5 for an 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. I'm here to capture those stories of why we all hustle and grind for our companies. Andy is a seasoned business attorney and founder of the Contiguglia Law Firm with nearly 30 years of legal experience. His business focuses on business law, corporate law, complex litigation, and risk management. He and his team are dedicated to assisting startups, entrepreneurs, and established businesses in navigating legal challenges and ensuring their success and compliance with the law, branding, and crisis and risk management. Andy is the author of Don't Skip the Legal, the startup guide for business owners and entrepreneurs, and the host of the Don't Skip the Legal podcast, YouTube channel, and other social media channels. Well, Andy, thank you so much for being on the show today. Really appreciate it. I know we've already had a really great discussion, so this is going to be a wonderful episode.
We're just going to go roll right into it, Andrew. So here's what we need to do. We need to set the ground rules right now. I'll call you Andrew, and you can call me Andy. That way, nobody's going to get confused that I'm not talking to myself or you're not talking to yourself.
Exactly. You know, although my mom is a psychologist and said talking to yourself is a sign of good mental health. I should probably put in there that she said that after I called her out for talking to herself.
Oh, there we go.
I doubt the validity of that statement. But I love it. You are the first Andrew we've had on the show too, so that works out well.
Even better. Even better. President company excluded, right? Exactly,
right. So You've been in law for a gajillion years, and I think it's really interesting, especially in business. I like to tell people the first person you should hire is a bookkeeper and accountant. The second was a lawyer, just to make sure you're good. To make sure you're fine. What kind of law do you specialize in? Because different types of lawyers.
That's a great question. Real quick about me. So I'm Andrew Contiguglia. I'm a lawyer. I am based in Denver, Colorado. I'm the founder of the Contiguglia Law Firm. I founded this business back in 2007. I've been a lawyer for going on 30 years now. If you include the times that I did my internships and things like that during law school, I've been in the legal field for over 30 years at this point. But my background is basically business law, corporate law, complex litigation, risk management. And I like to call myself the corporate casual business attorney because I think corporate lawyers are stuffy. I don't think they're fun. I hate dealing with them. And I didn't want to be that guy. And so it's important to me, Andrew, that I maintain a degree of approachability and personableness between the people I meet, people I engage with, whether it's clients or just networking people. I want to be available to them and I want to be present for them. And I just think a lot of these times lawyers have these, ties. Let me just button up my collar here a little bit and get a little bit tighter for you. That ain't me. And I think that becomes a really good, piece of the way that I've sort of branded myself and the way that I want to engage with others as an attorney. So I think that's real big. So,
and I think it's really important. Like for me, when I look at an attorney, I look at credentials and all the stuff that you normally would, but I also want to make sure it's somebody I can talk to, because we don't talk to our lawyers when things are going well. We talk to our lawyers when we've done something stupid or something's going wrong. And I want somebody I can talk to and just be like, dude, candidly, here's what happened.
I think, but you bring up a really good point, Andrew. So you mentioned, you want to make sure you have a bookkeeper, you want to make sure you have an accountant, you want to make sure you have a lawyer as part of your team. And everybody, all right, not everybody, most people overlook including a lawyer as part of their business team. I wrote a book recently called Don't Skip the Legal. It's the guidebook to entrepreneurs and business owners. And the first chapter in there is the argument, make a lawyer part of your business team. You're starting a company, have a lawyer ready to go. And there are different fee structures. There are different ways that you can integrate a lawyer into your business startup and into your business growth so you don't run into these problems. And what I tell people, Andrew, is, listen, you go to the doctor because you don't want to have the heart attack. You don't go to the doctor after you have the heart attack. So equally so, go to the lawyer so you don't run into litigation. Go to the lawyer so you don't have problems with risk. Get somebody to help you evaluate the problems that you're going to come up in your business and help me teach you how to navigate those so you don't run into problems. Most of the calls I get, you're right. They are, oh my God, this happened. How do I fix X in the past? And I sit there and, I'll bang my head against the wall and go, God, had you just come to me 4 months earlier, this all could have been avoided. And it's this idea called what I call preventative law, that nobody wants to get involved in preventative law. My motto is protecting you on the front end so you don't take it in the back end, but you got to get here sooner so I can protect your back end.
Yes.
Otherwise, your back end's already done,
Yeah.
and we're just healing you at this point. And
Exactly.
it's just
It's like with CPAs too, same thing. Is you only go to them when you're
yes,
audited, and it's like that's not really when you need them. You need to be somewhat proactive, especially
right.
with law. And there's a lot of
Come
different
to me
pitfalls.
before
Yeah,
the problem. Come to me before the problem. So
yeah.
there you go.
And there's so
Absolutely.
many pitfalls to fall into too. Like a lot of we were talking about like let's actually go into it. Non-competes. That's a
Yeah.
new thing now. Tell us a little bit
A
about
new
kind of your experience
twist,
with it.
yeah, a new
Yeah.
twist on an old topic.
Yeah.
And there, you get a number, you used to have companies trying to tie their employees into working for them.
Mhm.
And what companies like to do was say, Andrew, you're working for me, but you're so good, I don't want you to leave. And oh, by the way, I don't want you going across the street and opening up a competitive donut shop across the street from me. And that was the big thing with non-competes. I want to keep my employees from being able to go and compete against me and taking away my market share and affecting my business. That was the argument. And for a long time, that was there.
Mhm.
State by state, very slowly, that transitioned into this. Yeah, you can't force employees to not compete. That's a violation of, a right to work, ethic and in many state laws. And so they limit it to some scope.
Mhm.
Recently, and when I mean recently, like within the last year, the Federal Trade Commission started evaluating the whole idea of non-competes, and they reached this conclusion that it violated rights of trade and rights of competition. That was really what it came down to. I'm paraphrasing it for simplicity here. And the Federal Trade Commission started passing rules and regulations that basically said any non-compete is illegal. You can't do that. So if you're working for me, Andrew, I can't have you sign a non-compete.
Mhm.
So you can't go open up that donut shop across the street. Now, there are limitations on this.
Mhm.
So if you and I are business partners,
Mhm.
I can certainly put limitations on you opening up a competing business after I buy you out
Mhm.
for periods of time in a certain location for a certain period of time. So there are limitations to that, but it's usually up at this executive management decision-making level or
Mhm.
at this partnership co-ownership level. So those are in there. There's the FTC put out a whole laundry list of things that are exceptions to that. And by the time this broadcast probably will be a year into it, and things will be a little more fleshed out. But the Federal Trade Commission, you can literally go onto their website. They have a PDF that they put out about non-competes that you can do it. You can also look on my website. I've written a lot about the non-competes and this change in the law. I have 4 blogs that I just recently put out at contiguglia.com where you can read a lot about it and gain a better understanding of that. So anyway, Federal Trade Commission comes in, they put the kibosh on non-competes, they leave a few things in place like upper management, partners. But one thing you can do is you can protect your trade secrets. You can, so I can have a confidentiality, non-disclosure agreement with you that everything you learn while working for me and you can't take to somebody else. You can't steal my customers. You can't steal my clients. You can't steal my employees. So non-solicitation provisions, those are still in play. So there are ways that you can protect, what we'll refer to as sort of your intellectual property for your company and
Mhm.
making sure that your employees don't, come in, take your information or your people and run off and try to hurt you in that respect. I'm actually
Mhm.
engaged in a lawsuit over an issue of that right now. So
Mhm. Well, I think it's really important though, because as entrepreneurs, this is not our world. We kind of have an idea about legal, but honestly, we're okay at it. But non-competes are something we think protect us, and it doesn't
yeah.
necessarily. And that's something that's changed somewhat recently. That we're either unenforceable or now not even possible. So I want to pivot a little bit because what I love to hear is the story of how somebody got started. How did you get into law? Like, what
Oh,
was the series of
good.
events
You had to ask
that got
that
up to that?
question. All right. So I got to go back. So here I am. I got to go back to high school
Mhm.
because when I was graduating high school and going to college, I wanted to go to college to go into anthropology and archaeology. All
Hmm.
right. So by the time I was going into college, I had already been to South America on archaeological digs, working with different universities on, projects and grants and things like that in South America and also in Colorado. And so this was a big area that I wanted to do. I loved that space. And of course, in 1988, it was sort of right in the cusp of the Indiana Jones era. So, here I am, like, I'm going to be Indiana Jones and I'm going to go and do this. And I'm like, this is the greatest thing ever. I'm going to go do this. So enter college. I went to a small liberal arts college in Manhattan called Columbia University. Maybe you've heard of it.
Just a bit, yeah.
And I went there. I went in there wanting to do anthropology. And in all honesty, I did not enjoy the classes. I didn't enjoy my professors, and it ruined my taste in that space. And so I was like, this is not what I want to go into. I'm not enjoying this. So I did a slight pivot into political science and international affairs. And so I ended up graduating from Columbia with my degree in international affairs. I earned enough credits to minor in anthropology, which was pretty good, which, in terms of reading people and understanding cultures and things like that, I think is very helpful. But at the time I was in college, my cousin, who is from Long Island, was going to Fordham Law. And if you're familiar with the way Manhattan is, Columbia is up at 116th Street. Fordham Law is down at Lincoln Center at 68th and Broadway. So 116th. So here he is. He's a first-year law student. I got to watch him for 3 years of my college go through law school. And of course, he was like my big brother. And I was like, oh, I want to go to law school just like you. I went to law school wanting to be a criminal prosecutor. My whole background was wanting to use my degree and everything I learned in law school to be a prosecutor. And I did. I worked at the U.S. Attorney's Office for a little bit. I worked at one of the local district attorney's office doing real low-level crimes and things like that, prosecuting traffic cases, barking dog cases, small things like that. And that was really where I wanted to go. And for me, it was everything. And ultimately, my cousin ended up going corporate. He was a corporate lawyer in Manhattan for years, loved it, eventually moved down to Florida. But my path was a little bit different. I ended up going back to Colorado for law school and working in the local offices of those prosecutors here. But when I graduated law school and passed the bar, I didn't get hired by the DA office. And I was pissed. I was pissed, Andrew. I was like, fine, that's the way you're going to be. I'm going to go do defense work. And I literally jumped the fence from being a prosecutor to doing criminal defense work right out of law school. So here I am in 1995, 96. I'm doing criminal defense work. I opened up my business for the first time back in 1996. And I tried to sort of get into it and build a business practice. I did a lot of juvenile delinquency law, did a lot of bankruptcy. You're starting a business, you take anything you can. I was taking every lawyer I knew out to lunch. I was, because of my work at the DA's office, I knew all of the judges and they would give me court appointment cases. I met my first wife in the courts. Interesting sidebar. I met my second wife in the courts too. So I knew all the players in in this community of lawyers and judges. And so they were like, hey, you're starting your business. Let me appoint you to some of these cases. And I would just get an appointment after appointment after appointment, which was great because the state would pay. I would get appointments. I knew these judges. They knew I would appear and I would do a good job for my clients. And I built this clientele literally doing, work at $75 an hour, doing these sort of little piecemeals. And that's how I built my practice. So it was one to the next. I hooked up with a couple of different lawyers and shared office space with them. But in 1996, man, I had no business running a business. I hated it. I hated the bookkeeping. I hated chasing clients down for money. I hated billing clients for money. I hated all of the logistics of different things. I'm like, yeah, this isn't for me. So I went and I joined a small law firm in sort of the mid to late 90s for about 18 months and realized this wasn't the right place for me, which was interesting because they didn't think I was the right person for them. So we did this mutual departure in sort of mid 1999 at this point. So I'm 3 years into my law practice. And then I ended up hooking up with this lawyer in this law firm, a small law firm in one of the Denver suburbs called Littleton.
Mhm.
And I joined their firm in October, November 1999. And I was with them for 8, 9 years.
Mhm.
And that law firm was really where I learned pretty much everything about corporate and business, about litigation. I did more criminal defense work. I managed and handled some real high profile cases here locally, which was a lot of fun. And as I sort of built up through the ranks of that firm, I saw, so now we're at 2000, early 2000s. I saw the writing on the wall in terms of what was coming down the pike. I saw we had the dot-com bubble starting. You had Amazon that was really now starting to become out there. AOL was big everywhere. Everybody was getting those CD-ROMs in the mail to get
Yeah.
AOL and start email and all these different things. And everybody was on a personal computer. So early 2000, I said, listen, this world is going to change in this dot-com area. We need to start doing more work. And I want to start doing more work with businesses that are doing things online. The law firm I was with didn't see the utility in that. They didn't think that was a good space to be. They liked the brick and mortar. They liked the face-to-face stuff. And so as I wanted to look into this more internet-based law practice, like influencers and media and things like that, they were like, yeah, we didn't want to do anything like that. So in 2007, I'm like, all right, guys, you're not going to make me a leader in this business. So I'm going to go start my own. And I ended up starting my own company back in 2007. And I've never looked back. Here we are. It's, as we're recording on this, July of 2024. So 17 years of my own, more than 17 years at this time of my own business, which has been great. I love it. I'm still making, transitions or trying to make pivots for my own self because um, I enjoy working. I enjoy running businesses now. I
Mhm.
don't enjoy the practice of law as much as I used to. I think I'm way past that. And as a litigator, I think there's a sweet spot for lawyers who litigate. I think that's between the 10 and 20-year mark. I'm 10 years past that.
Yeah.
I want to just do deals, help people make a lot of money, button up projects and help companies stay out of trouble. I don't want to fight with people anymore about stuff. So for me, that's a little bit different now. So
Yeah.
long way of answering your question. How the hell did I get into law? But there you go. And here I am.
Hey, I'm the story guy. Yeah, I love the long stories. The ones you're like, I went to school for it.
There you go.
A little more. You did a great job, and I love it. So no, it was awesome. And you're doing, because I want to just keep going with this kind of train of thought a little bit. You're doing a major pivot to something totally different. Like you said, you're like 20 to 10 to 20 years is about the best by date for actually being in law. You're well beyond that. Now you're moving into something completely different, which I think is really
Yeah.
interesting. Tell people a little bit
Yeah.
about kind of
So
what happened with that. Like what led up to your new venture?
I think that's a great question. And if you look at sort of my history, you see these mini pivots.
Mhm.
You see these mini pivots in my legal world from, doing divorce work, which I won't do anymore. I hate it. I can't stand that practice area and dabbling in different areas and realizing that ain't for me. Doing different pieces. But all the knowledge that you gain from figuring out what you don't like is incredible in terms of figuring out what you do like. And I have litigated some, and I'm still in litigation on a bunch of cases, and it is grinding. It
Mhm.
is constant cortisol, it's constant fighting, it's constant problem solving. I'm going to get off this podcast. I got to call up an opposing counsel and fight with them. It's just not a pleasant place.
Yeah.
I'm 54 years old now. I am way past this, wanting to fight with people about crap, and
Mhm.
I'm over it. And so for me now, taking 30 years of legal experience, I look back and I'm like, we talked about this earlier. Like, remember when we were, well, if the game of, hey, if you could go back to when you were in college,
Mhm.
knowing what you know now, would you do it?
Mhm.
And everybody seems to think, yeah, if I could go back to college or go back to high school, knowing everything I know now, I could rule that school.
Yeah.
I could crush it if I had to start all over again. And so I take that philosophy, Andrew, and I sort of juxtapose it up to, Gary Vaynerchuk's, big pitch, which is like, listen, if you're in your 50s, you're still young enough to start a business.
Mhm.
And so here I am looking at making this transition from my law firm into a public relations, brand management, and risk management company. And trying to help companies do either one of two things: either grow, and that's where you get sort of the brand, reputation, management, public relations component, or manage risk in their business, or crises for that matter. And we've done a little bit of that for some of our clients. We represented a corporate client that had a really, really bad internal event happen, and I'm going to keep it as generic as I possibly can. And we had to manage the board of directors. We had to manage the person who was affected by these events. We had to manage the other employees and other members of this organization and quell their concerns about things. We had to manage a criminal investigation as a component of all of this. And when my old law partner and I were doing this, I was like, this is great stuff. It's not law. It's consulting and knowing where all the pieces are and being able to say, Andrew, you need to now move this piece to there. Much like you do with your coaching
Yeah.
and helping people build out TED Talks and speaking engagements, keynotes, and things like that.
Yeah.
You're like, here's your process. You need to come up with these, come up with your hook and come up with your first prime point, in all these different things. It's no different in risk management and crisis management. It's like, we got to identify the problem. We got to figure out the message we want to convey. And now we need to help. And I don't have to do that. I can bring my brain and my knowledge and to all of this and help people make sure that they are making the right decisions, whether it's from a growth standpoint or from a crisis standpoint. And in the crisis mode, you get obviously other components of public relations, but you get, managing those risks and, rebuilding brand identity. And there's so many great stories about, crises. And there's a great saying, and just sort of things that I've been reading about. There are opportunities in conflict. There are opportunities in crises, and you have opportunities for growth, and you have opportunities to make yourself better. And if you know how to address those events, you can really come through the other side having an opportunity for growth rather than one that you feel is going to beat you down throughout that entire process. So that's the lane I am now getting into as I slowly phase out my law practice and try to build up this, public relations company. It's not going to be a marketing company. It's going to be dealing with these specific types of issues. So.
And it completely makes sense, because as a lawyer, that's often what you had to do, is kind of step back as the outside objective observer and say, all right, you need to take these steps on it, take the emotion out of it. You're the one doing it. So it makes sense going into PR, because usually when you're in a PR mess, I had a good friend of mine years ago worked for a large PR firm, and they were emergency PR is what they specialized in. And lots of emotions, lots of things going on, lots of disruption. Having somebody who knows how to get through that noise and be able to say, okay, these are the next steps you need to take. So parallel skill set,
I mean, that's part of what I deal with. I mean, I deal with, companies that are in crisis from a legal standpoint, and having to counsel people on, how to maneuver the legal landscape so you think bad things don't get worse. Having them look at, oh my God, I'm being arrested, or one of my employees is being investigated, or any of those types of things. And it's one thing to be, digging into it and doing the legal work behind it and representing people against other lawyers and in front of judges and things like that. It's another thing to sort of be able to come up with a plan. And what I've noticed, Andrew, just for me and my forte is I'm a 35,000 foot kind of guy. I am a big strategy here. Getting into the weeds and getting into the details sometimes is not the best place for me. I'm a big picture analyst, and I think this will, going this direction for me, I think will be a good piece for me as I continue to grow in whatever I'm going to do moving forward for the next 25 years of my life.
Absolutely. So I do have one question, because I am also a strong believer that legal is a huge part of being in business, and there's a lot of different places we can trip up. What are three things that you've seen entrepreneurs, like especially solopreneurs, screw up that they can do better from a legal standpoint, besides getting a lawyer in before they need
getting a lawyer in first? Absolutely. So I think you have a couple of different pieces of that. And one of the big ones that I run into are not having written contracts.
Okay.
And you see a lot of people shaking hands, patting people on the back, hugging, kissing, whatever it is to seal the deal and get this understanding. But a really good written contract is going to help you understand my duties and responsibilities in this deal, and it's going to help me understand your duties and responsibilities in this deal.
Mhm.
And it's important that everything is laid out, I think, thoroughly, so there's no misunderstanding about how we're going to engage with one another. It's like going out on a date with somebody and making sure that you have these lines of consent in place in terms of what you can and cannot do with one another. I think the business relationship here with people and really well-defined contracts helps build better credibility. I told you I'm leasing out my building, and in the process of doing this right now, I'm learning a lot about my tenant coming in, and we are going back and forth and negotiating the different pieces of the lease. They're bringing to my attention concerns that they have by the way things are written, and I'm exploring, the nature of their business and what kind of accommodations and things like that they need. And so we're both sides are putting a lot of energy into the way this lease agreement is going to be drafted between the two of us. And in the process of doing that, Andrew, it's bringing us closer, I think, as business associates, as I become a landlord and they become a tenant, to really understand what they need. And I think that builds a better relationship between us. And it builds credibility between us. And I think those are really important. And the other thing with that is bad contracts are still binding. So making sure you have a good one is important. I don't think you can just sort of one size fits all, hit up LegalZoom and say, give me a commercial lease and everything's going to be happy. Because what I've learned throughout this process with dealing with this tenant is I'm building a relationship with them. If I just hand you a form contract, Andrew, and you read it, maybe you understand it, maybe you don't, but you sign it, what kind of relationship are we going to have?
Yeah.
That doesn't build trust. It doesn't build a relationship. So I think that's a big one. That's number one.
Mhm.
The next one really sort of falls into areas of, I think, um, uh, classification of workers. We talked about this a little bit earlier. And what I find is many entrepreneurs and solopreneurs, when they start having people do work for them, are misclassifying the people who work for them. So we have two classifications of people. We have either employees or independent contractors. And the problem that you see is people misclassifying people who should be classified as employees as independent contractors. And that becomes a big issue. So another story, as I was telling you, I just got done with an audit by the state of Colorado, who decided that they wanted to audit me for 2023 about the classification of my workers. Now, I'm smart enough, because I deal in this area of law all the time, that people who come in and work with me in the legal field are going to be employees for exactly this reason. I was like, I don't want anybody coming in here and auditing me, and I don't want to be dinged for something stupid. So for me, I pay the extra money for people to come in as employees because it's worth the insurance policy to me. Now, of course, on the audit questionnaire, they're like, do you understand the difference between independent contractor and an employee? And I'm sitting there looking at this going like, you are an idiot. You call me for that advice. That's like, yeah, I teach this. I write about this. Here, check out this blog. And I'm literally like in my audit, I'm like, here's an article I wrote about it. Of course I know. Did you ever do any legal research on independent? I'm like, God, are they really asking me these questions? And so I, you know, worry about what the auditor was thinking when she got my response to all of these things. And she's like, oh yeah, this guy probably would teach me the right answer to this stuff.
Yeah.
But in any event, misclassifying your workers, I think people who do the business, who are helping you do the business that you do. So let's take, like, for you, for example, or no, let's simplify this more, because I think you probably end up getting a lot of marketing people listening to this. If you run a marketing agency and your job is to produce content to people in their work, so your company writes blog posts and things like that for me, if you hire an independent writer to write blog posts for me through your company, arguably that person who's doing your content creation for you to pass on to me is your employee.
Mhm.
the IRS and the various departments of labor, there are like 19 different factors that they look into to decide if somebody is properly classified as an employee or an independent contractor. And I will tell you this, you can never be punished for misclassifying somebody as an employee.
Mhm.
If you classify them as an employee, even if they are plumbers, nobody's going to care
Mhm.
because it's a greater burden to you. And the state's not going to want to reimburse you. That's really what it comes down to. But if I misclassify somebody as an independent contractor and it comes back through an audit like the one that I just had last week, I can owe penalties. I can owe interest on those penalties. I can owe those people who used to work for me money, and it creates a lot of risk. So the true independent contractor, Andrew, is the person who does not engage in the business that you engage in. This is, I'm a marketing guy. My computers are down. I'm calling the IT guy who's going to come in and fix all my computers.
Mhm.
So that, the guy who runs, Chestnut's Computers Inc.
Mhm.
Or Chestnut IT is going to be the guy who's going to come in, fix all the computers, and then go off to the next job and do somebody else's job. That
Mhm.
is the true independent contractor. Now, could I hire you as an IT guy internally in my company? Absolutely, but they would be an employee because they're helping me run and operate my company. But I'm
Mhm.
not in the business of IT work. I'm
Mhm.
in the business of running a law firm, running a marketing company, whatever it is.
Mhm.
So you see that, for me, it would be a similar situation where here I am running a law firm and I'm contracting out paralegals or I'm contracting out lawyers. They're in doing the same business. Now, if I control the outcome of the work that they are doing,
Mhm.
now I am taking closer steps to having them be classified as employees rather than independent contractors.
Yeah.
So if you're going to have an independent contractor relationship with somebody, you really need to manage it as an independent contractor relationship, which means, all right, Andrew, I'm hiring you to help me write a TED Talk. All right. And you go, great, Andy. I don't know how you do your billing, but let's just say you do it by the hour. All
Okay.
right, great. I'm $500 an hour and you're going to pay me to do it. I'm like, great, this is going to be worth it because Ted Mile High is going to love me.
Mhm.
And we work, and we do this. And then at the end of every month, you send me a bill.
Mhm.
Andy, here's your bill for $5,000 for the 10 hours that I've put in. And I'm like, yes, you're so awesome. Here's your $5,000 check. And you're like, yoo. And there we go. And I pay your company. So it's an expense to me and income to you. You're running your own business separately. That is a true, independent contractor relationship.
Mhm.
That relationship could change if I also am a content creation company and I'm helping people coach and build talks and keynotes as well. And I'm like, Andrew, I've got this project. I'd love for you to put it together for me, but it has to consist of these different things. I need it delivered by a particular date. Now I'm putting control in on how you are managing and operating your business, which you
Mhm.
wouldn't do if you and I were just independent contractor and client. It
Mhm.
wouldn't work that way. I don't get to control how you do your business. I don't get to control how the plumber fixes the toilet or how the content creator drafts an article. Those are things. So you're looking at degrees of control. You're
Mhm.
looking at degrees of overlap in terms of the business you do and the business that I do. And that is a very, I'm going to caveat this, a very superficial view
Yeah.
of this. And everybody really, if you're worried about something like that, go talk to an employment lawyer who can really sit down with you and help you classify people properly because it is not a one size fits all.
Yeah. And I think as entrepreneurs, we just think, oh, I have more work than I can deal with. I'm going to go hire somebody else to bring it in. And there's a lot more to
Yeah,
think about in the back end of that than that,
absolutely.
a lot of questions you need to ask, and talking to a lawyer can really help out a lot.
Yeah, and the
Absolutely.
last one,
Mhm.
I think the last one is data privacy laws,
Mhm.
and making sure you have enough insurance. I think those two are really big. I'm going to tell another story because we like
Sure.
stories on this
Sure.
podcast.
It's great. I love it.
I represented, I represented a client. I'm telling you, I got a story for every situation. All right, so I was representing this client, and they were a medical office. And over the weekend, I get this call and they're like, you're not going to believe what happened. I'm like, what happened? Well, one of our employees opened up a phishing email, and the next
Ah,
thing we knew, everything got shut down. They
oh,
lost all of their medical records, they lost all of the data on their computers, all of this. And so I'm like, all right, well, let's walk through this. I'm like, that sucks. Do you have cybersecurity insurance? And they're like, oh God, no. Who thinks cybersecurity? Like, we're a medical office. Who wants to hack us?
Mm,
And I'm like, well, let's clearly these people did.
mm,
And it was a blackmail. So shut it down. You pay us X number of dollars, and then we'll release your computers, that kind of thing. And so I'm like, well, great. I'm like, let's check your insurance policy. And they're like, yeah, we don't have it, but there is a little piece. They only insure up to $10,000 of cyber. And I'm like, how much do these people want? They're like, they want like 2 million. I'm like, oh God. I'm like, all right, now let's back this up. I said, who's running your email servers? And they're like, this other company is. And they're doing all the storage and everything from your for your business. They're like, yeah. I'm like, what promises did they make you as you built this relationship with them? Well, they told us that if we use their services, um, that they would, everything would be data would be protected. They wouldn't be able to be phished and all these things. And I'm like, well, guess what? I think they breached that part of the contract. We need to reach out to them. Now, thankfully, they had like, 2 million, 5 million in insurance coverage for something like this. And
mm,
ultimately, the company that was hosting all of their data
mm,
paid out these blackmailers
mm,
to get it paid out. But I think data protection, but on top of all of that, now they had to notify all of their not their employees, I'm sorry, their customers, all of their
mm,
clients and patients about the data breach of what happened. Even big banks are having that happen. I've received notices from banks. I'm like, oh shit. Okay, I guess my name got put out in a data breach recently. So now we got to deal with that. So I think that is an important part, the way that you're protecting data. And I think nowadays, when we are also looking at gathering data from our communities, like I want to subscribe to your newsletter, Andrew, or your podcast, and you take my information under the GDPR and the
mm.
CCPA. I think you have an obligation to take only the information that is required for this transaction. So if I'm going to subscribe to your newsletter, the only thing you need from me is my email address. There you go. Don't ask for anything else. Don't ask for a credit card. Don't ask for my address. Don't ask for things that go beyond the scope of what is needed. And there's a lot under the GDPR and the CCPA, but I think these data privacy laws and making sure that you're protected from cyber attacks and things like that. I think that is really a really important matter as well. There's more,
Yeah,
but we don't have time for that. So maybe on part two we'll talk about some more.
exactly. Those are the big
Three
three. 'Cause
more, three more things to
even
protect
more.
your. I gotta put that down. I'm gonna do a post on these things. There you go.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I think, and cybersecurity is something we don't think about, but it is a big issue. I was part of the Home Depot, the data breach, and I've been part of so many data breaches. I just sort of assume people have my data, at this point and just act accordingly. But it is a huge deal right now, and it is something we don't think about as entrepreneurs because it's not sexy, it's not fun, it's nothing we want to do.
Yeah.
We want to go create, and these are the small things we've got to deal with.
Well,
So
every time you like log into something, you get like this notice from Google or from Trend Micro or whatever, like this password was recently in a data breach of 5,000 other websites. You're like, oh, really? Okay, go
great,
for it. You have to sort of evaluate, like, do I care if anybody gets this information? Not so much.
exactly. Yeah.
So
Nice. Yeah, I use a random password generator on everything. I stopped my days of using the same password for everything. I stopped that a while ago, just in case.
I am still learning that. I'm still pretty decent with making sure my passwords change, but I'm doing it the old fashioned way of like, got it kept here. I'm like, here's the rotation of passwords for this website. Here's the rotation of passwords for this one, and just making my list. But I think I should randomize it and do that.
Absolutely. So, as we're getting towards the end of this episode, this awesome,
Yeah.
amazing episode, there's one question I ask everyone, and that is, what is a book or podcast? And I think in your case, you're going to do
Awesome.
books.
I'm
Got a
going to say
couple.
books because they overlap, and it's sort of like right now as I'm going through my own, pivot and spiritual journey of these things. So these two books, so The Surrender Experiment by Michael A. Singer. Are you familiar with that one?
I am. Yeah. I've not read it, but I'm
That
familiar
one.
with it. Yeah.
And The Way of the Peaceful Warrior by Dan Millman.
Yeah. I'm in the
Um,
just started that one.
those
Yeah.
those two, have you heard of you've heard of that one? Yes,
Yep.
no? You
Just
have?
started it. Yep.
So it's those books. The Way of the Peaceful Warrior like changed my whole world in terms of the way that I look at everything. And it's interesting how that book sort of goes up, and then finally when our protagonist is out meditating, he comes back in and you realize, I don't want to ruin it for you, but the main theme that comes out of that book is making sure that you are present for everything that goes on in your life. That there is nothing that goes on in life that doesn't happen for a reason, that you should be able to find joy and happiness in everything that is available to you in that moment in time. And that you really should not miss the opportunities that are presented to you. And then when you sort of put that up next to the idea under the surrender experiment, that book really talks about surrendering to life's natural flow, trusting yourself to a higher intelligence and a higher being, and that will sort of help you be guided through your events. But in that process, you have to be present. You have to be available to what the world offers you and be receptive to it. And I don't think that you can do that unless you are aware of your surroundings and understand that there are that every opportunity that is presented to you is important. And I think those two books have really meshed themselves together in my brain right now. And as I'm really trying to sort of push forward my own spiritual journey in that respect. So.
Well, Andy, thank you so much for an enjoyable podcast. I really appreciate you being here today.
This has been a lot of fun. I appreciate it greatly.
Absolutely. Thanks again for joining us on the Hustle and Grind podcast. If you'd like to learn more about Andy, check out the links in the description.